Thank you so much for coming on this virtual walk through the Hamilton Heights and Washington Heights neighborhoods of Harlem for a tour of the amazing Audubon Mural Project. So the purpose of the project is to produce, mainly in the Manhattan neighborhood where John James Audubon lived the last decade of his life, murals of climate-threatened North American birds. So as I said, thank you to Tappan Library for hosting me. I lived in Bergen County for 35 years, so I'm also familiar with Rockland County. I used to get my hair cut in Piermont and drive right by the Tappan Library. So I have a good feeling for exactly where you are. So I'm going to go right through the presentation, which I hope will be an hour or a little less. And I absolutely welcome you to write comments and or questions into the chat as we go along or afterwards. And also we're going to make it possible as soon as I'm done for everybody to unmute and state comments or questions out loud. So just a little bit about me. I was a nonprofit librarian. Yes, actually, I'm a retired librarian in New York City for 36 years. I retired almost 10 years ago, and I became a licensed New York City tour guide in 2017 and developed this tour also right around that time as an actual tour. And during the pandemic, I turned it into a virtual tour. And now I do it sometimes like today as a virtual tour. And I just did it this past Sunday as an actual tour. So if after you've seen the tour online, you know of any other groups that you think might be interested in the virtual version or the actual version, I hope you'll please let me know. It's a great tour potentially for walking groups, nature groups, women's clubs, social justice groups. So my contact information is here. I'll be putting it on the screen again later. And of course, the library knows where to find me also. So we're going to start with a map and some geography. So I'm using a map from the website of the Audubon Mural Project that's meant for a self-guided tour. So first, the neighborhoods in northern Manhattan where the Audubon Mural Project is mainly located are Hamilton Heights, which runs from 135th at the bottom of the screen to 155th, and then Washington Heights, which is 155th up to about 200th Street. And the western boundary of the neighborhoods is the Hudson River. And the eastern boundary is Edgecombe Avenue. So that would be running up and down where it says Jackie Robinson Park there is Edgecombe Avenue, which would be about the equivalent of 9th Avenue. So the project now actually runs past where this map goes to the north. It starts in the mid 130s and now runs into the low 180s. So the center of gravity of the project has been moving more into Washington Heights. So John James Audubon's property was just above the Trinity Cemetery there on the left. The northern boundary of the cemetery is 155th. Mr. Audubon's property ran from there to about 158th in today's streets, and from the Hudson River to Amsterdam Avenue. So this is the other side of the map on the website for a self-guided walk. So this map is quite out of date. I can see at the bottom, it's dated 2019. So I'm going to be sending Gwen the list that I give out to everybody on actual walks of all the murals on the route. So if anybody does decide to go up and try to see the murals in person, that please use the list that I am going to send you via Gwen rather than this list, just because this is kind of outdated. So the neighborhood we'll be exploring is named for, the first neighborhood, Hamilton Heights, is named for Alexander Hamilton. So his home, the Grange, was built in 1802, and it still stands at 414 West 141st Street in St. Nicholas Park next to City College. So it's a terrific New York tourist attraction run by the National Park Service. But the neighborhood was home to another iconic person, John James Audubon. So he purchased the 20 acres that I just showed you in 1841, at a time when it's hard to believe the area was still mostly farms, woodlands, and country estates. So his home no longer stands and his property was sold off. So today, Hamilton Heights is mostly low-rise apartment buildings from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It's actually a lovely old Harlem neighborhood, remarkably unaffected by modern real estate development. So John James Audubon was born on what we now call Haiti in 1785. His father was French, but owned a plantation, a sugar plantation in Haiti. His mother was a French household employee in Haiti named Jean Rabin, who died shortly after his birth. When Mr. Audubon Sr. returned to France, where he and his wife did not have children, his wife agreed to have young John James Audubon sent for. And so John James Audubon actually grew up in France, but he was sent to America as a young man, probably to avoid being conscripted into Napoleon's army. So after living in a number of places in the US and traveling extensively to paint 400 species of North American birds, he settled in New York in his mid-50s and built his home in about 1842, lived there for the last 9 years of his life until he died in 1851 at age 65. And I do want to mention that there's a major reevaluation of Mr. Audubon's legacy going on right now. He was an owner of enslaved people who sometimes accompanied him on his journeys, and he was specifically anti-abolition of slavery. So some Audubon chapters, including the New York Audubon Society, have decided that they're going to change their names, but the New York Audubon Society just made this decision in March and hasn't picked a new name yet. So a little bit about the origins of the project. It's a collaboration between the National Audubon Society and Avi Gittler, shown there on the left, an art collector and dealer. So he opened an art gallery in Hamilton Heights in the fall of 2014 and closed it at the end of 2018. So it was an unusual place to open a gallery, as there are not other art galleries in the neighborhood. But he wanted to open his gallery there due to his family's roots in Washington Heights. His grandparents and parents were from Washington Heights, and Avi lived there till he was 10 years old and his family moved to northern New Jersey. But he actually returned to Washington Heights for both high school and college at Yeshiva University. So after opening his art gallery, which is shown there on the right, he decided to commission some artists he knows to paint about a dozen decorative murals to cover the roll up and down metal security screens on the fronts of the buildings. And the first screen he chose to paint is the one on the right of the gallery in the right-hand picture. And the first artist he invited was Boy Kong, who's not the artist in the picture. Boy Kong is from Orlando, Florida, and decided to bring a little Florida pizzazz up to Hamilton Heights by painting a flamingo. So he had actually been given no guidelines and could have painted anything he wanted. This is kind of a funky flamingo with an alligator jaw. So this made a light bulb go off in Avi's head that Hamilton Heights was also John James Audubon's former neighborhood, and that all the decorative murals should be birds. So around this same time, Avi met through one of the artists, a neighbor up in Hamilton Heights named Mark Janot. Mark worked for National Audubon and told Avi about the Society's September 2014 report entitled Birds and Climate Change, which concludes that 314 species of North American birds could lose more than half of their ranges by 2080 due to rising temperatures. So this report had a profound effect on Avi, and he drastically changed the project from one that would maybe have only included a dozen decorative murals to one that would eventually include all 314 climate-threatened North American birds identified in this report. So a huge undertaking. And it also became a project with a very strong message about the effect of climate change on birds. So, so far about 110 murals have gone up. They depict about 150 species from the list of 314 that were identified in the report. So both an impressive accomplishment and a long journey ahead with more than half of the species still to go up. Also, I want to mention that at least 30 murals have actually been lost from the project for a variety of reasons, which we'll discuss as we go along. So all the murals are tagged with the URL of the Audubon Mural Project. And I encourage you, if you're so inclined, to go to the website for much more information about the project, including a link to the 2014 report. And there's also a link you can click on for each of the murals to get more information about the birds, the effect of climate change on the bird, the artist, and what the mural means to the artist. So we're going to start our virtual walk with these Calliope hummingbirds by Christy McCarthy. So this bird is a perfect one with which to start for two reasons. First, it's one of the smallest birds in North America, measuring only 3 inches long and weighing well under an ounce. So we're going to begin with a small bird and we'll be ending with some large birds. Second, this mural begins where new life begins, which is with a mating dance. When I have a nice statement from the artist about the bird, I like to share that with you. So Christy says, hummingbirds symbolize resilience, adaptability, joy, and playfulness. With the Audubon report focusing on population decrease due to loss of nesting habitat, I chose to do a mural depicting the mating rituals of these adaptable little long-distance migrating lovebirds. This mural is a love story. So now let's peek around the corner on the same building and see what happened after the mating dance. So now new life has begun and mom and dad are feeding a baby Calliope hummingbird. So please be sure to note how the area of the screen below the birds is mesh, because we're going to come back to that subject of the mesh later in the tour. So these are ovenbirds by Cernesto. The bird gets its name from its nest, which is a domed structure that sits on the ground and resembles a clay oven. The artist Cernesto has signed the mural in the lower right-hand corner. Perhaps he chose a bird named after its nest, as his name actually contains the word nest. He says the use of the ovenbird for my mural was drawn from visual and sonic inspiration. The abstract organic forms were developed from graffiti, infused with shapes of invertebrates and the ovenbird's home, and what I think is the species' unheard song, joining the noise of the urban world. So this is one of 3 images of John James Audubon that we're going to be seeing on our walk. Well, actually, I think we're going to see 2. The cerulean warbler on his shoulder gets its name from its beautiful blue, which is also the color of the sky. So here we see John James Audubon as an older man. The inspiration for this is no doubt that he spent the last 10 years of his life up in Hamilton Heights. Many people have commented that he doesn't look very good here. So this is for a sad reason, which is that he was probably very near the end of his life in the photograph on the left, which seems to be the basis of the painting on the right. So the photograph is dated about 1850, and Mr. Audubon died in January of 1851. So he may well have had some strokes and not been the person that he used to be. So these 2 murals are next to one another like this in the project. The one on the left is Balloons for the Common Loon by Christian Glynn. So there's some wordplay going on here, as the word balloons contains the word loons. The artist says, the common loon was a perfect fit for me, as I often incorporate text into my work. He also commented on the bird's somewhat oxymoronic name. So this raises the question as to what the oxymoron or contradiction is. It could be that if the common loon is threatened by climate change, it may not be common any longer. On the right are mallards by Graham Preston. The artist says, growing up around mallards, I referred to them as my wild pets. Being born on the Delaware River, I used to dangle my feet off the edge of my grandfather's dock and throw feed to the mallards. When I discovered that these plentiful and gorgeous animals were in real danger of losing important segments of their habitat, I was shocked. When they see it, I hope folks say, even the mallard, really? These are brown pelicans by Jason Covert. He says one has to but watch the brown pelican perform its graceful feeding dives to understand how poetic an animal it truly is. As a Cape Codder, I have spent countless hours sitting by the sea, and as such have long been a fan. It was an honor to work with this bird's image. These are Black Vultures by Marthalicia Matarrita, who was born and raised in Harlem. The text says in English on top and in Spanish below, a bird that is often misunderstood. The artist says, I found that this particular bird gives many negative reactions from people. Not many people understand that its natural survival methods are not predatory. They're scavengers. They're the ones that have the leftovers. Every animal has a role to play, and the vulture plays an intricate role in the cycle of life. Helps me sympathize with other beings that struggle daily to live. And I wanted to mention, because Marthalicia Matarrita is from Harlem, that there is much more emphasis in the project now in having the artist be from these neighborhoods. So this is another local artist, Snowman. A lot of artists use a street signature. Marthalicia Matarrita actually uses M2 often. So I don't know Snowman's real name, but there's an awful lot going on in his mural. Starting with an artist's fact that an artist's name is Snowman has chosen a Canada goose, which is certainly a cold weather bird. Also, the mural where the yellow shoes, or they're actually probably those Timberline construction boots painted in yellow, are so prominent. It's on the awning, or it's on the front screen of a shoe store, as we can see from the yellow awning above. So Snowman has given this Canadian bird kind of a New York urban makeover with a Yankees cap, gold jewelry, and construction boots, and the words on the necklace, to fly. That's certainly another play on words. And that tends to mean too cool. And of course, cool is another pun for a Canada goose. And then you might be able to read some words in the red and white text right above the goose there. It says, goose gets down. So that's a reference to dancing, but it's also a reference to a second threat that this bird faces besides climate change, which is the goose down industry. And so there's kind of a target there on the bird's back, and the interest in the bird's down is referred to with that target. So this is Christy McCarthy painting a glossy ibis. She's the same artist who painted the calliope hummingbirds with which we began. And I just happened to be in the neighborhood on Saturday, September 30th, 2018, when this mural and the one around the corner from it were being painted. So you can see that Christy is using spray paint, which is the major kind of paint used on security screens. There were a couple of dozen cans of spray paint on the ground in all different colors. You can see that Christy is working from a photo of the glossy ibis. So she says, I chose the glossy ibis for its graceful disposition and beautifully colored plumage. I wanted to gift the neighborhood with a mural that would be colorful, elegant, and visually appealing. So I think it's safe to say that Christy certainly succeeded. So working along with Christy on the same day at the same building, right around the corner, was Palumi Adagawa, a freelance artist, muralist, and instructor from Lagos, Nigeria. So the Lewis's woodpecker is named after the Lewis of Lewis and Clark. So she says, I chose the Lewis's woodpecker because its dark iridescent green back in combination with its red face and belly really stood out to me. Although it's a small bird, its colors show boldness and strength. So this is the stunning result of a day's work by these two gifted artists dealing with very challenging surfaces with all those ridges. The two murals are tied together in a couple of ways. Each bird is surrounded by a gold circle, and some of the red background of the Lewis's woodpecker spills over to the glossy ibis, and some of the blue ground background of the glossy ibis spills over to the Lewis's woodpecker. This is a Pinyon Jay by Mary Lacey, who's from Vermont. She says, I would say that the reason I chose the Pinyon Jay is that I loved the blues. I like the relatively monochromatic color scheme because it gives me more freedom to play within that one color. So this photo is a good opportunity to see the kind of apartment buildings that proliferate in Hamilton and Washington Heights. It's also the first mural we're seeing above street level, so it always raises the question, how does the artist get up there? Given that there's a vast amount of scaffolding in New York City, we might think that's how they gain access. But actually, Avi rents what we call a lift or cherry picker. So this is a much more expensive mural to create. But once it's up, it's quite spectacular and pretty much out of harm's way, especially in terms of unwanted tagging or graffiti, which we'll talk more about. And this photo also allows us to see how Mary Lacey outlined the bird on the wall, which in this case was using tape. And here's a close-up of Mary and her colleague painting the Pinyon Jay with house paint. These are black-billed magpies by Andre Trenier, who's from the Bronx. He says, I chose the black-billed magpie because of its distinctive colors, its high intelligence, and its obsession with shiny objects. They have often been used to symbolize people's fascination with false perception and materialism. Something quite wonderful happened, which relates to this mural. An HBO series with the title Divorce used the Audubon Mural Project in its plot and did some on-location shooting up here to capture the murals on camera. So here we see the star, Sarah Jessica Parker, walking past the black-billed magpie. She plays a woman, Frances, from Westchester County, who's getting divorced. When she separates from her husband, Frances moves to northern Manhattan and goes to work for a bird preservation organization. One of Frances's responsibilities for her new job is to organize walking tours of the Audubon Mural Project. So I think we can say that the fact that the Audubon Mural Project was selected as one of the backdrops for a TV series produced by and starring an American superstar like Sarah Jessica Parker is definitely a feather in Avi's cap. So for the next mural, this is the only time I'm going to show a photograph of the bird before I show the mural. The black tern, if it's not exactly black, is certainly charcoal gray. So now let's see what the artist Laura Raymond Frontello has done with the black tern. She says, I like adding color to things. So I just took the black tern and gave it my colorful touch. So this is a Townsend's warbler by an artist whose street signature is ATM. The bird and the front of the supermarket are in this relationship to one another, but I've just separated them to blow up the mural. So there seems to be some word playing going on here, as the mural of the Townsend's warbler is on the front of the Seatown supermarket. The store's logo is red and yellow, the same colors as the mural. So we're looking at the bird, and the bird is looking at what? The food. And to the left of the bird, we can see the very relevant words, save more. And where is one of those taggers when we need them to add below the words save more birds. So this London-based artist says that ATM stands for anarchist troublemaker. He says, my painted walls exist to call attention to the beauty and importance of those living creatures that are so often overlooked. The hope is to inspire active participation in further environmental improvements. Then art will have achieved its purpose. So since ATM also stands for Automated Teller Machine, this is a good place to talk about how the Audubon Mural Project is funded. Funding is a challenge and there's no guaranteed funding stream. There is a donate button on the website. Another way that Avi is funding the project is that he's turned this dazzling mural by George Barugi into a limited edition print entitled Gang of Warblers. It's selling for $150. And these are a couple of framed versions, and I'm very happy to say that the one on the right hangs in my own apartment in New York City, and I just love living with the warblers every day. So in case anybody is interested, there'll be information at the top of the handout, which everybody's going to receive from the library, which tells how one can get hold of the Gang of Warblers print. So one way to make the project go faster is to include more than one species of bird in a mural. So this one actually includes 3 species, the Bullock's oriole on the left, the red-breasted sapsucker in the middle, and way down there in the lower right corner, an American 3-toed woodpecker. Jacinta Stewart, originally Australian, has a wonderful artist statement about the mural. My other passion in life, as well as painting, is teaching early childhood. When I walked past the offices of Washington Heights Pediatrics, I thought about painting some chicks of the birds on the Audubon list. Both parents of the Bullock's oriole feed their chicks, which is how this species became central to my mural. It was an amazing experience painting live on Broadway. Strangers brought me lunch, brought me a cushion for my knees, and thanked me repeatedly as they walked by. The highlight for me was when I witnessed toddlers being wheeled into the pediatrician, waving and blowing kisses to the chicks. That moment of the children making the connection made all my efforts worthwhile. So on the same block, these are 2 representations of the same bird, the mountain bluebird, both by the same artist, Nathan Catlin, the same artist as each other, that is. So in this case, the screens are not adjoining as they were with the calliope hummingbird, and the representations are quite different. Nathan Catlin has the pithiest statement of any of the artists. He says, it's truly a lovely bird. So in between the 2 mountain bluebirds is this reddish egret. It's different from all the other murals we're seeing for 2 reasons. First, it's black and white. Second, it's on paper created in a studio with a combination of drawing and printing. When the paper is glued to the paper is glued to the doorway with a liquid adhesive made from wheat flour and water. So for that reason, the mural is called a wheat paste. So now I want to return to the subject of unwanted tagging or graffiti. So this is the way the mural looks now, faded. And you can see that there's a dial there, which I'm going to refer to as a clock. So that's made with a stencil and spray paint, and that image appears in other places in the neighborhood. So if there's such a thing as good graffiti, this might just be it. So first of all, the tag is black and white and matches the mural. Second, the Audubon Mural Project is, after all, about time possibly running out for these birds. So the clock seems to add a real poignancy to the mural. These are Hooded Warblers by Gira Lozano. They're painted on a wall above a school playground. She goes by Giraluz, G-E-R-A-L-U-Z, and you might be able to pick out her signature there on the lower right in the right-hand photo. So the Hooded Warbler, I would say, is the most Audubon-like of the murals we're seeing today in the classic way that the birds are portrayed. and the use of the old-fashioned looping script to give us the basic information about the bird. The text even includes the wonderful name of the vegetation, bird's foot violet. The artist says birds are present as main visual elements in many of my artworks. They represent and celebrate the natural fauna and flora of the local area where the mural lives. I love drawing and painting birds because they invoke freedom, focus, and having a higher perspective. So on the left, we have an evening grosbeak, and on the right, a black-headed grosbeak. So we see the artist Louise Jones here in the cab of the lift that she and other artists use to paint murals, which are above the first floor. Her street signature is Wheezy, O-U-I-Z-I, and we can see where she signed the left mural on the upper right. She says the evening grosbeak is Eastern Northern based, and the black-headed grosbeak is Western Southern. I live in Detroit currently, but am originally from Los Angeles. So I chose two birds to represent these two opposite spectrums of the country. These are Wilson's warblers. So they, among other things, represent a third way that Avi came up with to fund the Audubon Mural Project. So this is what we call a sponsored mural, and we can tell that because the rightmost screen, which has been blown up here, has in the lower right corner, in memory of RMK. So every mural is available to be sponsored by an individual or group. So what a lovely way to remember someone who died, but a mural could certainly also be sponsored for someone who's alive and celebrating a special birthday or anniversary or event like retirement. It would certainly be a perfect gift for someone who loves birds. So this is a lovely Western tanager by Belarusian American artist Yubaba. And we can see her signature there in the middle on the left. So I'm really sorry to say that this mural did reach its life expectancy early and is gone now. The reason for this is that Marina Dental Office moved out of the storefront. The landlord took the screen down as part of renovation. There's a new rule in New York that new security screens have to have mesh, at least at eye level, so that first responders or landlords can look inside to see if there is a disturbance there, what's going on. The solid security screens like this were grandparented in, but once they come down, they cannot go up again, even if they include a lovely mural like this. So the next two murals we're going to see are on the newer kind of screen with mesh at eye level. So let's see how the artists have accommodated the mesh. So the title of this mural, Three Little Birds or Every Little Thing Gonna Be All Right, are from a Bob Marley song. So the three birds are on the left, a blue-headed vireo. On the right are two northern parulas, and the one in the middle is the smaller female. So no doubt the mesh has influenced the placement of the birds. I think the artist has actually handled the mesh very well, and you can see that the mesh is even spray painted, to match the color of the bird at that particular point. So this is a great place to mention things that we can all do to make sure that every little thing would be all right for birds. So plant native plants, have bird-friendly windows, set up bird feeders, keep cats indoors, support organizations that work to preserve birds. If we find an injured bird, try to take it to a bird rescue organization. We have a wonderful one here on the Upper West Side of New York, where I live, called the Wild Bird Fund, but similar organizations in other communities can be found on the internet. And the easiest thing of all to do is talk to our friends and family about how important bird preservation is to all of us. So this is right around the corner on the same building. Although the screens are on the same building, the two screens are quite different from one another. So this gives us another opportunity to see how the artist who goes by Bluster One has handled the mesh. So this is a rare mural where the name of the bird is included. So if there's one thing I could change about the project, it would be to include the name of the bird on every mural. But the artists do have a choice about that. And as you can see, most of them have decided not to include the name. But I do think if you're going to educate people about what birds are most endangered by climate change, it helps to start by naming the birds. But I think there are going to be some QR codes added to the murals, which people can scan to get more information. So this is a yellow-throated warbler by George Barugi. So, so far we've seen 4 places where murals are created in this project. We've seen them on security screens, on the sides of buildings, in window frames and doorways. So this is a 5th place attached to a pre-existing frame that was originally used for an advertisement. There's 7 of these frames in the neighborhood. They contained faded ads for an energy drink that doesn't even exist anymore. So Avi got a great idea to take over the 7 frames and repurpose them as sites for murals. So these 2 murals were created in a studio on panels and then affixed to the frames. And I think if you look closely, you can see the clips that hold the mural to the frame. So repurposing the frames is a win-win for everyone. The residents of the neighborhood don't have to look any longer at the old, ugly, and irrelevant eyesore advertisements. And Avi has 7 great new places to install murals. So this is one more mural by George Barugi, the greater sage grouse. So he says this bombastic bird commands our attention with its stunning appearance and mating display. The health of the environment and its inhabitants, including us, is our responsibility. That's why I wanted to depict this bird as bold and confrontational and holding us accountable. So I think that's a great statement because, of course, the bird's fate is not in their hands, it's in our hands. This is a snowy owl by Mike Fernandez, who's originally from Peru. He's also a photographer and actually took most of the photos of the bird murals that are on the Audubon Mural Project website. He also takes photos for the Wild Bird Fund, which I just mentioned. And this is a photo of Hedvig, and Hedvig was found injured near New York City's LaGuardia Airport. Fortunately, a volunteer brought Hedvig to the Wild Bird Fund where Mike photographed the bird. He says, "I was starstruck being in the presence of this magical creature, knowing we would never cross paths again. So this moment was special." So the good news is that Hedvig spent several months in rehab and was eventually able to be released back into the wild. So this is the Tropical Perula by Carla Torres. And something so striking about this mural, of course, is that it's in the colors of the flag of Ukraine. It was painted in 2021 before the current war began in 2022, but the choice of color certainly seems like a statement in support of the people of Ukraine. So now we're going to visit Audubon's grave site, which is right next to the Church of the Intercession on the grounds of the Trinity Church Cemetery at Broadway and 155th Street. So this church sits on land owned by the historic Trinity Church downtown. That's where Alexander Hamilton is buried. So Trinity Church bought land up here in Washington Heights in 1842 when the cemetery next to the downtown church was running out of room. And the Trinity Church still owns the uptown property. So this is Audubon's grave, and it's right next to the church. As you can see, it's the very first one when you walk in. So for 40 years after his death in 1851, Audubon's grave was marked only by a simple stone that said Audubon. but it was felt that a more impressive grave marker suitable to a man of his stature and accomplishments was needed. So the New York Academy of Sciences raised the necessary funds, and they chose this block of bluestone from the Catskills. It's carved in the shape of a Celtic cross and includes a portrait of a handsome young John James Audubon at the bottom. The grave marker is appropriately decorated on the front with birds. And it seemed like the person who designed the birds on the front had a bit of a sense of humor, as the bird looming right over Audubon's head is a vulture. So on the back of the grave site are quadrupeds, which are four-legged animals. So Mr. Audubon was working at the time of his death on a catalog of quadrupeds. It was completed by his sons and published posthumously in 1851. It's not very famous anymore, but it must have still been famous in the early 1890s when the grave marker was put up. And I want to point out that the church steeple that we see there belongs to another church, the North Presbyterian Church, which is across 155th Street from the graveyard. So back to the corner of 155th and Broadway, we're going to see two large murals, both one level up from the street. So this is a fish crow by Hitness, who's from Rome, Italy. Since the bird is looking west, it's looking toward the Hudson River and basically looking at the site of the former Audubon home at 155th and the river. So sometimes people ask how long it takes to paint a mural. This mural was basically painted in one day, and I feel like I should say only one day. So before we look at the next mural, I just want to show Audubon's rendition of the bird. So this is what was called a swallow-tailed hawk in Audubon's day. Today we call it a swallow-tailed kite. And you'll see that Audubon even, or the current artist, who goes by Lunar New Year, even included the garter snake that the bird has caught. So this is a swallow-tailed kite. It's actually a flock of 13 birds. There are 5 in the upper wing, 4 in the body, and 3 in the lower wing. And they'll be enumerated in the handout that everybody's going to receive. So the artist says, I want to emphasize all these different species, different birds coming together as one flock, as we must, to save our planet. So now we're going to look at a couple of large birds, which will be the end of our walk in Washington and Hamilton Heights. And then before we close, we're just going to look at a couple of new directions in the project. So this is a peregrine falcon, the world's fastest bird. It can plunge from the sky at a speed of up to 180 miles an hour to strike medium-sized birds in mid-air. In the middle of the 20th century, the peregrine falcon became an endangered species because of the widespread use of pesticides. Their recovery was influenced by the publication of the book, The Silent Spring, by Rachel Carson in 1962. Her book focused attention on the chemical industry and its impact on our environment by the heavy use of DDT. Due to a ban on DDT starting in the early 70s, along with large-scale protection of nesting places and releases to the wild, populations have recovered. So finally, on this part of the walk, we come to the most iconic of all American birds, the bald eagle. It's our national bird, and it appears on our national seal. The artist is Peter Davrington, who's from Australia. This is his statement. I chose the bald eagle because it's the symbol for America, my new adopted home, and represents freedom, strength, truth, and justice. When the bald eagle became the national symbol in 1782, there were 100,000 breeding pairs in the United States. That dipped to just 417 in 1963. Today, thanks to conservation efforts, There are over 7,000 breeding pairs. Thankfully, this great bird lives on. And I'm going to add, let us hope that all of these great birds live on. So now, having concluded our walk through Hamilton and Washington Heights, we're just going to look at a few new directions that the project has taken. Oopsie. So one is that there was an Audubon sculpture project. It was a sister project. Unlike the Audubon Mural Project, which has no time limit, the Audubon Sculpture Project was always meant to be temporary. So it took place from mid-2019 to mid-2020. That's the artist Nicholas Hallingby. So he's pictured here with a merganser. And there's a map on the right of the 10 sculptures that he created. And so it was a much smaller but wonderful complement to the Audubon Mural Project. The sculptures were at intervals along Broadway from about 64th Street up to 157th. So about every 10 blocks, there was an Audubon sculpture. So a couple more of them. This is the peregrine falcon, which is interesting to see because, of course, we just ended our walk through Washington Heights with the peregrine falcon. That's part of the Audubon Mural Project. And these are scarlet tanagers. So all of the birds are made from wood from packing crates that have been disassembled. And that's in keeping with the theme of the environment and reuse of materials. So Nicholas Hallingby specifically picked for the Audubon Sculpture Project from the list of 314 birds that spend at least some of their time in New York City. So the last one we're going to see from the Sculpture Project is a snowy owl, quite stunning. It was actually constructed in 2018 in Avi's former art gallery, which he allowed to be used as a workshop in between art shows. And so it's interesting to compare it to the Audubon Mural Project's Snowy Owl by Mike Fernandez, which of course we just saw. Oh, and I do have one more, which is the wood duck. And people have pointed out that this is a wood duck in every sense of that phrase. So a second new direction of the project is the first mosaic. So these are two trumpeter swans at Broadway and 163rd Street. And they were installed in December of 2020, just at that really awful time at the end of the first year of the pandemic. I think Avi wanted to do something really spectacular that would sort of cheer everybody up. And this is really brilliant when the sunshine hits it. It was funded by a grant from the Gelman Foundation, which supports visual arts and emerging artists. So that's another way that the project is funded, with some foundation grants. And the swirling sky in the trumpeter swan mosaic certainly seems, at least in part, to be excuse me, influenced by Vincent van Gogh's painting Starry Night, which is at the Museum of Modern Art. So this mosaic, as you can see, was actually created on slabs, and the slabs were applied to the wall of the building where it resides. So the mural mosaic should certainly last as long as the building lasts. And it seems, because of the way it was constructed, that it could actually be removed from the building and moved to a museum or something like that. So hopefully this gorgeous mosaic will more or less last forever. So another new direction is partner cities. So as word about the Audubon Mural Project got around the US and beyond, other cities decided to create Audubon murals. So one example is Chicago. So Rogers Park is located on the north side of the city, and within the park is something called a Mile of Murals. It's a community-based art initiative that began in 2007. And within the Mile of Murals are a number of Audubon murals. So this is one of them. And this is another one. And the last new direction I'm going to talk about is painting murals beyond Manhattan in the outer boroughs of New York City. So this and the next one are the first to go up in another borough. And in both cases, that's Queens. So the location of this is Forest Park. The artist is Ernesto. So you may remember that we met Ernesto at the beginning of our walk, as he was the artist for the Oven Birds. So originally, Avi had intended to put all of the murals in northern Manhattan. But as word got around New York City about the Audubon Mural Project, it's not surprising that other neighborhoods began asking if they might have murals also. So over time, Avi's thinking has evolved, and he's decided to have maybe 200 to 250 of the birds in northern Manhattan and spread the others around the other 5 boroughs. So finally, we're going to end with this enormous mural in Astoria, Queens, of 2 American black ducks. At 175 feet, it truly makes for a grand finale. The artist is Peter Davrington, the same one who painted the bald eagle, which we saw on our walk through Hamilton and Washington Heights. It is sponsored by the National Audubon Society, and it's right on the East River, which actually makes it impossible to see the mural from Queens. So a good way to see it is to go to Carl Schurz Park in Manhattan at about 88th Street and York Avenue. That's where the mayor's home, Gracie Mansion, is. So from the mansion, walk straight ahead, preferably with a pair of binoculars, to the water and take a look. And another great way to see it is from one of the ferry boats that the Metropolitan Transportation Authority now operates on the East River. Peter Davrington says, "I chose the American black duck because its natural habitat is next to the mural location on New York City's East River. They are true New Yorker ducks. They're streetwise, they're handsome, and the heart of their range is the Northeast." So thank you so much for the opportunity to show you these amazing murals of the Audubon Mural Project and tell you their stories.